Hey, this is Kevin Hughes, and this is the Derek Pernissiglio Show.
Get out, drive you!
That's what we do. We're in the entertainment business, really.
Right, I know.
You know, and that's what these guys, the people you want to grab a hold of is, that's what we're really not in the racing. We're in it at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, you're here to put on a show, and
Yeah.
the show is for the fans.
Yeah, when you do these pit parties and guys act like they don't want to be there, they
Yeah.
should be like talking to the kids and engaging, and that's the future. We forget that. You know?
And I think that's what one of the things was about growing up around the sport, like when we were younger, because that was your chance to be a celebrity once a week. Well, at the race, at the short
think about
tracks.
that. Like, I grew up at Beach Ridge. I wasn't allowed. This is a long story there. My parents didn't really want me going there, but as I got older, I remember the first time after the race, I got to walk out on the track, and they'd trailers and stuff pull out front. Put my hand on that hot tire and looked at the car. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And Homer Drew and Ralph Cusack and all these guys, and they were just a guy that worked at a gas station during the week. It's the same now, but they're the hero that day of the year, a day of the week, right? And the same thing at Bowman Gray. Like, Jason Myers he worked at UPS.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But on that night, he was a hero, man, right? And we've got to promote more of that, like that story and promote that, which we don't promote like we used to. It was easy before, right?
I think that's one of the things that Bowman Gray does provide to the racer is that chance to be that Saturday night celebrity again.
Yes.
Like we had Chris Romano on the show here, and he's a longtime writer in motorsports. Mm-hmm. He said that there's no local heroes. Nobody wants to be a local hero anymore.
Right.
Everybody just wants to
go to lunch with Bobby Meismer in Harrisburg right now. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't, Concord's closed how long?
Yeah.
We can't walk through I see our T-shirts everywhere. It's crazy. He was the guy for a long time, just like Query and Jack Sprague and everyone else before him. But, man, at Bowman Gray, Farmer Ted, man, they played that up. And, after the races, that pit area is packed.
Right.
And, look at the Myers, it's 200 people deep.
Yeah, bring the mic just a little bit closer.
Okay.
That was one of the things that I was going to ask you. I mean, we're just rolling, so we're just going to talk.
Sure.
We're going to bounce around from subject to subject, so the conversation can go wherever.
Master of editing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was going to be my thing. I was going to ask you, what possessed you guys to go modified racing at Bowman Gray? Because of course Bowman Gray had the reputation of being the madhouse, and there's fighting and all that drama that goes on. Were you nervous about running at Bowman Gray with all that stuff happening to you guys? Because you guys always kept to yourselves. You guys always very professional and show up with clean, fast cars every time.
Yeah, it was. Bobby and I had gone there a couple times and seen it, and we might have only had one car then, which turned into our stadium car. Mm-hmm. And it was Bobby's birthday, and he says, let's go up there and run that car. We'll put it in stadium trim, which a lot of people don't know. There is a difference between a tour modified and the stadium modified.
Right. You're allowed to run a ratchet in the stadium, and you have to run a spool and the
right, and 10-inch tire. Yeah,
right.
And so we went out there with the spool in it, and just for fun on his birthday weekend, and he's diamonding the corners. And we finished like 9th. It was crazy, but it was insane. And people, it was crazy. We were loading up after, and people, hey, you gonna come back? You gonna race? And Bobby's like, man, we should give it a shot. And we ran, I guess, 2.5 full years. He won Rookie of the Year, the modifieds there.
Okay.
We won some races. He's in the record book. That's the coolest thing, being in the, you open it up. I think we're tied with Bobby Allison, with the feature wins there.
How many feature wins did you guys win there?
2, and in that one year when we were the camera car for the show.
Okay.
For the second version of the show there, and won a pole, and really had a great year. But people that say you go there, you tear up all your junk, and we didn't. I mean, Farmer Ted, he was the show a lot of nights, but a lot of it was easy bolt-on stuff. We've had far more damage running on the tour and certainly at Concord than we ever did at the stadium. But
Really?
yeah, but it's just
I would expect with the tight quarters and the close racing, the bumping and banging,
like we never clipped a car out there.
Okay.
Yeah, and like serious frame damage stuff, but there's a lot of bolt-on parts.
Right.
If you look at our two cars, we have a tour car and a stadium car. I'm old school chrome tour car, so the tour car is all decked out in ridiculously expensive chrome Nerf bars and wheels. But at the stadium, we were in black, So we took that into account. But
now, when you talk about Farmer Ted, what you're talking about is Bobby Meesmer Jr.
Yeah.
And great guy. I remember Bobby from the early days running the little four bangers at Concord back in the day, and he just went racing with his dad. How did you guys meet and come together, and then become his car owner in the modifieds?
Yeah, really great story, and it's a teaching story I've told many times. But I knew his dad when I first moved down here. Long story short, but my shop teacher in high school at Scarborough, Maine, ended up working for Hendrick Motorsports, and he and I got together and built a street stock for Concord. And across the street was Bobby's dad's best friend. And so I knew Bobby's dad, Bobby Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first met Bobby, he was probably 8, 9, 10 years, something like that. And fast forward many years, he wasn't allowed to race until he was 18.
Mm-hmm.
And he turns 18, and this is another good story about how bad do you want it. Like, he wanted to race. He grew up going to Concord and watching his dad and his uncle and everyone else race, and he gets a job at the junkyard right near his house. They get it out. I don't know what 4-cylinder car he had there.
I think it was a Honda Prelude or something like that.
Might have been. He said, I want that car. He worked till he had enough money, bought it, drove it home. And they built a race car out of that thing, and he went on a tear, man. He won so many races, they kicked him out of a bunch of places. They called them Hornets, I think.
That was it, the Hornet division.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They still have the car. That roof is papered in wind stickers. It's insane. And so I get this phone call from Bobby, and this is what I love about him and his family. He calls me. I don't know if you remember me. You probably know my dad. And I'm racing this little 4-cylinder. We need some radios, and I was wondering if you could help me out, whatever you can do. And so I gave him some old used stuff. I mean, some beater stuff. And it was just enough for what they needed. And he would call me every single week. Hey, just to let you know, we won this week and finished second. Whatever happened, right? Mm-hmm. And I was so impressed that he took the initiative to do that. It was almost annoying at some point. Like, I get it. Would you win again? How many of you win, Mm-hmm. But he understood at a very early age the importance of a relationship and partnership. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I don't know how much longer after he got out of the Hornets, moved into like a limited late model stuff out there. And I think he ran UARA too a little bit, but he ran at Concord. And same thing. Hey, man, I could really use another headset, or I need a push to talk. Help me out. And still send me photos of the car and tell me how he did every week. And so he calls me up towards the end of the season, and he said, hey, get near the end of the season, are you going to ever come out and watch me race? So I go on out to Concord, and this car is beat. It's a beater, looked like it was a white car, and it looked like painted tinfoil,
Right.
But that's what I loved, right? Because he wanted it, and that didn't make the car go faster. Mm-hmm. Which right. He'll laugh when he hears me saying this. Because
didn't the car have a moonroof, and they had to weld a plate over the moonroof?
The 4-cylinder did.
The roof?
Yeah, the 4-cylinder did. So I go out there this one night, and he's running that, and it was just a comedy of errors of the other. There was a fight out there on the track, and anyway, he wins a championship out there, going away like by a bunch, and the car's just beat, and he's got my name on the car, and he's got racing electronics stickers on it. And he does all this stuff right. And we get to after the season ends, and I had given him like $600, and I think it was $100 a week for tires out there. Used takeoffs from the late models.
Yeah.
And he says, "Man, I don't know what we're gonna do next year. I think we're gonna race again. Are you gonna can you help me out again? And I was doing this personally out of my own pocket just because I wanted to give the kid an opportunity, something I never had.
Right.
And they certainly weren't loaded with cash. And they were just, when you went and saw what he was working out of, the open trailer, an old beater toolbox, and, Harbor Freight jack stands, and, what everyone does at that level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he just worked so hard. And here were the words that I say I live to regret, but I said, man, I'm doing this out of my pocket. Not, I'd buy a trailer or equipment, but I don't want to buy tires and fuel, just throw money away. So I don't know. I don't really know. I did it to help you out. But if they ever brought the Big 10 series back to Concord, man, I'd want a super late model, man. I love those cars. And lo and behold, over the winter, they announced they were bringing the pro late models back, and they called it the Big 10.
Right.
And I get the phone call. Hey,
guess what?
Remember when you said, and I was like, you know what? Let's do it. And I bought a brand new Port City car from BSR. And I said, well, if we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it. You got to clean that car up because he was still going to run it in the limited late model division. So we rebodied that car, had both cars the same, like F1 style. It was really cool. You showed up like we were big time, and
I think I remember that. You show up with the straight rail car, and then you had the limited late model, which was the perimeter chassis, right? Okay.
Yeah, and they were wrapped the same. And I said, man, we got to clean up the program. I said, I know it doesn't make the car go faster, but it's perception. You show up with your stuff right. We don't show up and scale the car. We do everything at the shop. Show up looking professional. You get some gear, some T-shirts or whatever, but let's ramp up the deal and let's go after it, and let's do it at a different level. And man, since that day, first of all, his family, their family to me, I can't say enough good things about both Bobby and his parents and that whole family. But
they all work hard. That is something that I will give to them, yes, because they go out there and they don't win with budget or, big flamboyant stuff. They win with hard work and homework.
Here's the thing. Over the years, I get far too much credit as car owner. The perception always is, well, you own that, you must be loaded and rich and you get money to throw around. But that's not what that is with Bobby and I. We're a true partnership, right? Mm-hmm. And we share everything. That guy calls me every week. We're I'd say we're best friends. Probably he said more of like a father figure, but I certainly don't want to take place of his father, who was just good as gold. But it's just worked, and man, right out of the box, we were winning races like right away. And it's because he works hard at it. And I've had people over the years, hey, if you're thinking about making a change, I'd like to drive the car. What are you going to show up with a helmet and a fire suit? I don't want that. That's not what I ever wanted. I wanted to give somebody the opportunity that deserved it. And you know where I'm coming from because you come from a racer family. And there's always that, rich kid syndrome. Everyone's jealous because a kid's family owns a big business and they have this money to spend. And I mean, if my family had lots of money, I wasn't ever going to say no. I won't take the money and go race. But
right. If I had the resources and I had a kid, I would want to put him in the best equipment possible. If you have it, you would definitely do it. And
I grew up at Beech Ridge. Same, there were families like that. In Concord, certainly there were families that had lots of money, but Bobby didn't have that, and I wanted to be that guy that helped him and help give him the opportunity. And really, the intent was, I'll help him for a little while, and people are going to see how good he is, and somebody's going to say, hey, come drive my stuff, and you just show up and drive it. And that was the deal from day one, is I'll put the thing on jack stands if you get a better ride somewhere and do that. Mm-hmm. It turns out that didn't quite outwork. Our stuff was good, and, mm-hmm. and we were competitive, and we won a lot of stuff. And we went astray a couple times with partners, and that didn't work. We found out that us together was the best deal. But man, we won. Geez, one year we won. I think in the limited we won. Out of 14 races, we won 12 and finished second twice. Wow. I mean, it was that last year we called it the dream season. It was dominating. And in the pro late model, I think we won 4 or 5, 6 races there. And man, it was fun. But I also say that because I understand short track racing. It wasn't good for the racetrack. Nobody wants a local guy to win every race. So then you turn into the bad guy. But geez, fans always loved
a win's
him.
A win, man.
Yeah.
That's it. No matter what, whether there's 2 cars in the race or 20 or 40, a win's a win.
We used to hear that all the time, like, there's only 12 cars in the race. I mean, he'd start shotgunning and be leading in 2 laps, which was cool when we talk about it, right? Everyone had the same opportunity to go race with us. But, back when I remember you had 2-time Concord late model champion Mike Herman Jr. on here not long ago.
Yes.
And let's be honest, when he was racing, they had 28 and 30 car fields, and you had Ricky Hendrick and Lance Moss, and you had some
big
fields.
Big yeah.
So for him to win 2 championships, that's huge. Now I rub it in a little bit. Bobby's 3rd all-time winningest driver at Concord now, behind Freddie Query and Jack Sprague.
No kidding.
But certainly not 30 car fields every week, but we were the best of who was there at the time when we were racing, right?
Well, you race what you're given, as Bones Borsier would say. You know, he people talk about, well, you won because of this, you won because of that, but you race in what the circumstances are, period.
It's funny going back, we ran, he won in everything he sat in at Concord, and that track is just, man, we miss that place. That was a racer's track, and he had that line, and people who watched him would say, man, he knows the line. There was a line to run out there, and if you got it, and I remember people coming up the trailer, new guys, new kids, or like when ASA would run with, or CRA would run with us, and they'd ask for, tips on how to get around the track, and it was always, if you're not flat through the dog leg, you're not even fast enough. And you'd hear the burp in the throttle, and who never was not flat in the dog leg? That was Bobby Meisner Jr. That guy got on it, and man, we had a lot of good times there. Hate to see it go, but
one of the biggest things too, I think, that introduced Bobby to the modified racing world was that one year that he started deep in the field at the North-South Shootout in the modified, and he had just come through the field, just boom, 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 picking them off. And if the race was, I would say, 5 laps longer, he would have caught the leaders.
That's the one race that eluded us. It hurts. We sat on the front row a bunch of times, and probably had the worst wrecks in his career at Congo. He got hurt a couple times there.
But I chatted with Dave Moody after that race, because it had been the first time he had seen the North-South Shootout. And he said to me that Meisner kid was worth the price of admission.
He's like that a lot of places, even if we're not running up front. He's a character. And
how did the nickname Farmer Ted come around?
That was me. Man, we used to have, he had this, like, I want to say a 44-foot gooseneck trailer. It was giant. It was like a giant dungeon, not very well lit. And
triple axle, right?
Yeah, I think so. And people that know me, I'm pretty OCD about wanting everything perfect and nice and clean, And I forget what specifically happened. I think we had a caliper break or something one night, and we didn't have an Allen wrench, large enough socket Allen wrench to pull that caliper apart. And it's like bush fix type of thing, right? Or racer fix. But so I'm rummaging through this cavernous toolbox of old stuff, and I find a chisel, which is the same shape of a Allen wrench, and we ended up cutting the chisel in half, and we made it into a socket, and pulled this thing apart. And I guess it was from the John Hughes film, pretty. I think it was Pretty in Pink.
No, 16 Candles.
16 Candles. Yeah. Farmer Ted. And he's like, I think he used other words to describe the fix, but we settled. It's something Farmer Ted would come up with, because farmers. I'm from Maine, so you just see where like tractors sitting out in the field, and I remember asking my dad or grandfather, like, why is it just sitting out there? It was the end of the day. Wherever they were, they dropped their tools and parked the tractor and then come back and get it the next day. And that's sort of how Bobby is.
Really?
Kind of a running joke between us. But Farmer Ted, that's just kind of stuck. And man, at the stadium, they went crazy over it. They love that. And we did a line of merch and everything. And it's pretty popular.
You've been associated with the Meisner family for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Like Bobby Sr., and you've seen what Bobby Jr. can do in a race car. Now there's a third generation,
Yeah.
and he's winning too. He is one of the threats at Millbridge or wherever he goes and he races.
Just when I thought I was gonna get out,
They pull me back in.
yeah. Man, he's been around it his whole life. You know,
Brody.
Brody. We have pictures of him sitting in the car when he was a toddler, and he's worked around the shop. And then, man, we kind of got in a little trouble. I think at Wilkesboro, we got a little bit of a pickle there because they might have filmed at pit stop, and he's changing fronts, and he was 9.
Oh, really?
10. He's probably one of the faster changers on pit road now.
And he's 9 years old changing tires?
Yeah, why not? I mean, he was doing that in the shop.
Wow.
Yeah. And
and Bobby's totally cool with it.
Absolutely.
And so is his grandfather?
Sure. He carried for his dad. He carried for senior, for a couple of races. He changes fronts now for us.
Wow.
And
so was this the NASCAR modified tour race at Wilkesboro, or was it the Smart? Not the open race that they had.
Yeah, it was the open.
Technically, it was, yeah.
But he's changed tires since, and he was pit signed for a while, and that didn't sit well with him. And
so wait, so you got in trouble? Who come and
well,
talk to
I
you?
mean, I wouldn't say we got in trouble. It was.
Did an official come speak to you?
It was ill-advised down the road, at that age, and let's make sure we're all safe and got helmets on and all that. He's out there, I think, in Crocs and shorts and a tank top, but part of that was I challenged him. I said, if you want to change tires, you got to practice. And so the stadium car is sitting in the shop, and he and Senior chucked up the hub up there, and he's over there hitting lugs during the week at 10.
Okay.
And so it's how bad do you want it, right? Do you want to be part of this? And so Bobby didn't really push him hard. So they went out to Millbridge, and it didn't work for a little while. Some kids get it, some don't. Bobby's a little bit frustrated there. It was soccer dad mentality, and it was funny. The first time I ever went to Millbridge was as a guest of you, and I remember walking in that place, and I knew everybody there. Like everybody in the sport was there with their kids, and you kind of live through your kids a little bit. So Bobby's frustrated, man. He just doesn't get it. He's driving circles, and well, is he gonna get it or not? And literally one night, switch went off, and the kid figured it out. And from there on, they were, winning races. That's all he thinks about. It's all he wants to do. And the car's sitting there waiting on him. We could, the stadium car, made 602.
Okay.
Car maybe.
I've talked to some of the parents at Millbridge sometimes that get frustrated with their kid or they're not running that good or anything like that. And I would stop them. I'd be like, listen, in about 10 years from now, you're going to say that these were the best times ever. So enjoy this because, 10 years from now when you guys are running late models or modifieds or whatever and the work is twice as hard. The competition is 3 times as deep. Not to say, the competition in Millbridge is incredible, but all of those things, it becomes bigger and tougher and more expensive, and you're going to look back and say, this was the fun.
I just told this story. I was talking to Mike Christopher a little while back, and Mikey, was racing his the legend car, I think in the winter shootout at Charlotte Motor Speedway. This is 8-10 years ago. It's a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember they weren't good. They sucked. And I think him and Joe Pelham are walking out, and I was like, man, I just came to see it. The kid doesn't have it. Yeah, this is a waste of time. He sucks. He was mad. Like all these drivers are out there. They want their kid to be instantly as good as them, or whatever. And it's unrealistic expectations, a lot of levels, right? You had to learn, like with Bobby and his son. Bobby didn't race till he was 18, And
it's Little League.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
You got to look at it that way.
And then I remind Mike of that. I was like, remember when you said, now this kid's just, this kid can wheel it,
Mm-hmm.
It was just funny, that switch goes off and they get it. Some do, some don't. But, a lot of parents have that unrealistic expectation, the next Jeff Gordon type of thing, or, next Kyle Larson syndrome, right?
I know.
You go out to the shootout or some of these races and stack our haulers and tote our homes and backup cars. And it's like, what's the real percentage?
Full-blown 18-wheelers.
Oh.
I know. Yeah,
I remember Ryan Preece came down to Daytona one year, and he had just won the Tour Championship, and he was just trying to get his foot in the door. No one really wanted anything to do with him. There's a guy with street cred, right?
Mhm.
Real stats. And, I mean, he was just really upset. And I'm like, man, you get for like 4 or 5 rides now, in the north. He had an SK and a tour ride and all
Right.
this. And
He can call someone and say, hey, I want to run here this weekend. Can you,
and he didn't,
do you know where I could find a ride or
and
something?
he didn't come from a wealthy family, right?
No, I
They
know.
helped.
Oh,
they,
I know.
They certainly, he came from a racing family that helped him. But
His father and I talked, and Ryan worked just as hard to try to find money to go racing as he did to work on the cars.
I mean, he just won Martinsville, and you think that car got put together by itself? He didn't hire someone to assemble. That was him, right? But I remember saying, man, you got all these opportunities back home, and if it doesn't work out, there are people up north that might be as good as you that never got the opportunity to even sit in one of those cars.
Mhm.
Look at Mike Stefanik. He made a living really in the north, staying up there, right?
Right.
I said, but it may work, it may not. But it's how hard do you want it? How hard are you willing to put in the effort, to really put in the effort and grind and deal with it? And, look where he's at,
Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, that I always say is that this is supposed to be fun.
Yes.
We're supposed to be having fun doing this, and you have to find that enjoyment in it somewhere, because I see a lot of guys that go racing and it's just win at all cost mentality, and they're fighting and arguing and all of that going on, and we're supposed to be having a good time doing this.
We have 2 rules with my race team with Bobby, and it was from day one, was have fun and be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there have been days weren't necessarily fun, and some days we weren't necessarily competitive, but in the entire time we've been together, we never had a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit of a silent treatment for a short period of time, but we're old school mentality racers, I think, and the running joke is load that thing up. There've been races we've gone a couple laps down, and I just get on the radio and like just load it up. It's not your day. Don't be someone else's problem, right? Load that thing up and go home. It's like you said, it's about having fun and enjoying this. We're not doing this for a living. He's not expecting to get the phone call tomorrow and drive for, Hendrick Motorsports.
Right.
So we understand where we're at. But yeah, to your credit, there's a lot of people out there. You just see the pressure they're under, and they're not enjoying it.
Or the pressure they're putting on their kids.
Yeah. So Bobby and I have had that conversation. Certainly he's had it with his dad, with Brody's, because look at Brody's situation, and a lot of kids where their dads are racers. And when I was joking about, go walk around Harrisburg with Bobby, everyone stops him, and, certainly their family's from there and they're well known, but, it's everywhere you go. Bobby's had to listen to all this talk about his dad winning all these races, and so there's that expectation that, I hope I'm as good as him. Of course, he's won more races than his dad has the past 3 or 4 years, so that doesn't go unnoticed. They bust each other pretty hard on that, but
he is one of the guys he is one of the guys that you expect to see in the A main every Tuesday night.
And look, when he doesn't, he's had his crying moments. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, you're like, suck it up. But on the other hand, that shows me how bad he wants it. And he wasn't crying necessarily because he was going to get yelled at. It's because he was so disappointed, whether it was in himself or his crew chief, which is Bobby.
And I've seen Bobby at the track with him some nights just basically be flat out with him by saying, it's racing. It's gonna happen. He's like, we just got to deal with it, and and then we go to the next race.
But he also doesn't blow smoke up his skirt either.
Right.
When he comes in, it's you sucked,
right?
Or man, you had the line right, or hey, what are you doing? You just we burning tires and fuel. So that's the other thing. I don't have kids, so it's easy for me to say how you should or shouldn't do it, but. He mentors him. This is what you should do. You should be a parent, mentor your kids out there. So the soccer dad mentality of just screaming and yelling, that kid doesn't want to do that. He won't want to do it anymore. And they've had their moments for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think with Bobby, his mindset is, man, I didn't have the opportunity when I was 10 to race.
Right.
And so Brody can get out of bed get dressed and ride his bicycle to the shop and build a race car out of what's sitting in the shop. It's all there for him. Right?
So they make him work on his stuff.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
He's got a checklist, some of those things as he's gotten older that he's responsible for. And not like that originally, because you just assumed he would do it, because Bobby just assumed, well, he wants it as bad as I do. But, he realizes, you got to give him some structure and you give him some accountability, right? We had this conversation not long ago. If he just wants to go ride around at Millbridge, there's so much work. Everyone knows it's in racing. You live this 24/7, 7 days a week. The cars don't prep themselves, right? There's a lot of work involved. And, if you're just going to go out and ride around in the back and make laps, then go to K1 Speed or, Victory Lane Karting, right?
Yeah,
and
just
do
to
that.
go get some laps under your belt.
Let's just do that. And or do you want to go out there and race? And my deal with Bobby is running 10th every week for me. I'm not going to do it. I'm not even remotely interested. I want to know that when we show up, we have an opportunity to run up front and win. You don't always have. It doesn't always go that way, but that's the same thing he's trying to teach Brody is, look, we're going to show up prepared and with the capability of winning, but some days it's not going to work out.
Right.
The track isn't going to suit you, whatever. But you got to give it 100% every time.
Right.
And if you're just going to go out there and cakewalk it, his daughter's, plays travel ball and softball, same thing. Are you going to practice or are you just going to show up every week? There are games when she may not have been at her 100%. And, Bobby's like, come on, because it's that expectation. But he's been, he's just matured so much, especially with his kids, because before it was all just about him and racing. And now with his kids, you see the maturity change. And I see that in a lot of the other racer parents that are out there. Some get it, some don't. But, you've experienced it. I'm sure you've probably got lots of stories.
Oh, we try to remind my nephew, who is now driving for my dad, that, we didn't have these opportunities that you do at 8, 9, 10, racing quarter midgets and all that. We had to wait till we got into our early 20s before we had a chance to drive. And then the other thing that I try to express to my nephew is that, other people are putting up this time and effort and money and everything for you to be able to drive. So you have to appreciate that and, do your part for the team.
I mean, Brody's helmet cost more than I had invested in my whole first street stock. Right? I mean, that's just how, that's a long time ago, 1983 or 4. So.
Actually, let's go back to that too, because you are a guy from Maine that came down to North Carolina. How did you get started racing back in Maine? Yeah,
I'll try to shorten the story best I can, but I grew up about 2 miles from Beach Ridge Motor Speedway, so I got to hear it on Saturday nights. And my biological father, who was divorced my mom when I was 2 or 3 years old, but he owned a gas station or ran gas stations, had a wrecker service, and he was very involved in racing. And I have memories when I was like 2 years old sitting in a race car. And then they, after they got divorced, my mom remarried, and they weren't real big race fans, but man, it gets in your blood. I don't know how to explain it. I'd hear those cars racing. I could hear them every Saturday night. Drove me crazy. And they just didn't want me. He was still out there. I think they were worried about confrontation, and, he wasn't a great guy in his younger days. And so, fast forward, I'm 14 or 15. I want to get a car to drive on the road, get my first car. And they're like, yeah, you're not mature enough to have your own car. And they said, well, then I gotta get a race car. And they're like, yeah, sure. And I worked at the local gas station, Scarborough Exxon, which sponsored a NASCAR North car. Beaver Dragon drove it, and Kevin LePage.
Oh, wow.
And so I got enough money and bought an old street stock. They call them limited sportsmen there at Beach Ridge, a little more advanced in a street stock. And it was a crap box, but I had everything I had in it. And, the best people that I have ever met in my life and still are friends to this day, I met in racing. I look at the people that are down here. Rex Garrett was a local racer and gear guy, and he ended up coming down here, and he runs Dale Earnhardt Inc., Earnhardt Technologies. I knew, Don Letarte, Steve Letarte's dad. Steve was a little kid before he moved down here. Rick Johnson, all these guys that work over at Penske, Bill Griffin, who was my shop teacher in high school. He's retiring at Hendrick Motorsports, and he worked, at Diamond.
He was your shop teacher in high school?
And he had a race car back then, and he built cars. He had a great shop. It was him, Steve Levitt, and Letarte were probably the biggest car builders up there at the time.
Well, the main area of the country, that is a hotbed for late model racing. They always talk about the Northeast being big with modifieds, but the really farther north that you go, it's really all about pro stocks and late models.
Yeah, so Beech Ridge, when I was growing up, was still clay. It was that oiled clay. And when I raced, the couple of years I raced, it was clay. And then they paved it in 85, I think.
With a Chevelle you were running, right?
It was an old Cutlass. I had a couple of them. They were beaters, man. But
that's what the paint job is on this diecast right here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the funny story about that is... Beech Ridge, it's in my heart, and the rumors were around that place was going to get sold and shut down for like 20 years. Ever since the Cusack family bought it, I think there was rumors it was going to get shut down eventually. And, here I am racing at at Concord with Bobby, and I always said, man, I'd love you to see my home track sometime. And they put the Beech Ridge on the tour schedule there 2-3 years ago. And he calls me right away, and he said, we're going.
Oh, okay.
And that's expensive to go up there.
I do. I remember you guys went up there.
Yeah, and so we went up and tested, and we had a phenomenal test. He wasn't a big fan of the track, to be honest. But
because you're constantly turning.
Yeah, and not a lot of grip there anymore. And then the dirt pits, they weren't paved like we have down the south. But, it's funny, of all the through my my employment, I've been about every major racetrack there is in this country in every state, and Beech Ridge still ranked in the top 5 as quality, clean, well-run track. So anyway, we tested up there, and then we ended up running the tour, and we broke a trailing arm bracket in practice, and it just went to heck after that. We didn't run very good, but it was cool to see all the people that I grew up with and go back there. And so the story behind that, so when we went up there to the test, I met them up there, and they had the car sitting in the infield with a cover on it. Of course, I'm all spazzed out because I'm OCD, and I'm like, why aren't we ready to practice? Why is the cover doing on the car? And they pulled the cover off, and he had it wrapped to match my street stock, which is also that paint job on my street stock was Beaver Dragon's paint scheme that year when he drove for the Deeren brothers, and they gave me the paint. I didn't have any money, so they gave me the paint to paint the car, and so they were Beaver Dragon was 75, and I was 57, and then it was.
That's cool.
One of the most cool. It's easily the coolest moment ever. With Bobby doing that and his family doing that for me. And
the funny thing is I grew up with these. With all the different modified tour guys.
Yep.
As a kid, they had the clear cases, and they kept these lined up in it. And just to be able to have something that is your car, and something as an iconic toy as what we remember is so cool.
Yeah, I'm proud of what Bobby and I have done together, and when you work in the sport, you get a bit jaded to the industry, And I look back, and when I raced, I never bought a tire. I used old used tires that I got from people. The only new part of my race car when I was 15 years old in high school was a Holman and Moody window net I bought off Bill Griffin. And it's probably worth $500 now. I think I paid $20 for it.
So you were 15 years old running a street stock, essentially.
Yeah.
Who did you have helping you out?
No, hardly anyone. It was all myself, Rob Herrick, who raced at Beech Ridge, and he won his, I think the last night we were there before they closed that track, he won a feature. He helped me. There was local kids helped me there that I went to school with, but you know how that is when it's hard, and when people see how hard it is, not everyone wants to come help. But my uncle Rodney was big help. My parents weren't super into it, and they certainly didn't have the financial means to help me. But man, I blood, sweat, and tears in that thing, and some of the best memories. And the other thing is, man, I saw some of the best racers at Beech Ridge.
Right.
And if they had ever gotten an opportunity, there were guys like Kevin Durgan, who run with me in Street Stock or Limited Sportsman. That guy could have driven a Cup car, or we had all the other famous drivers like Homer Drew and Dick Walton-Hume, and McCabe would be there off and on, and all these big names, and
the Dion's would show up every once in a while.
Yeah, it turned in the Actor. Yeah,
Right.
They ran with Curly, and so you'd see all those big names come into town, which you don't see that anywhere anymore because these local series are kind of development series now. They're not like they used to be.
I had been to Beach Ridge many times in the past. My brother got one of his wins in the midget
There you go.
up there at Beach. Had to beat Bobby.
I loved it when they used to come. And
Yeah,
race
that was wild track for the midgets was Beach Ridge,
Yep.
and he beat Bobby Santos that night to do it.
Another big name, right?
Another
there.
huge name.
Yeah.
That was really cool. But what a heartbreaker, right? Hearing about Beach Ridge
Yeah.
going away, and kind of the way that it did go away. It was like they ended their season, and that was it, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that because, look, I moved south, and the track I race at in the south gets closed down.
Mm-hmm.
The track I grew up at closed down. It's heart-wrenching because it's a part of your heart, if you like anything that you grew up doing with your family. And look, I have skin in the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is my living, is to have racetracks in business and being profitable, and that's the key. There is profitable. No one wants to run a business that's not profitable, and it's tough nowadays. And with Concord, the owners, kind of were tired of putting money into it, and it was for sale for a long time. Other people could have bought it, and that's unfortunate. But with Beach Ridge, it took me a long time because after we raced there, then the finality of it was real there a couple weeks later when they announced it, and I think the way it happened was unfortunate for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up with the Cusacks. Andy was I think a year ahead of me in school. Glenn was a couple years older. Ralph was one of my heroes growing up, watching him. He bought the track in I think 1980,
Mm-hmm.
And did a lot of improvements there, paved the track, and it was a show place up there. And
I love the grandstands that they had there. They weren't like any other grandstands because they had a little more rake to them.
and tall, yeah.
They were tall, and you didn't really have people's heads in your way because there
Right.
was such a separation.
If I would have done anything to improve that place, would be pave the pit area because it was always dirt. But the cost of that is insane. But it was always clean and well run, a good family environment. It's funny if you go to Bowman Gray, you know what I mean when I say run a show. Bowman Gray, it gets knocked for being this crazy place, but man, they have a meticulous run of show, and they're on schedule. Beach Ridge was like that, man. If you didn't have your car lined up, I go tracks all over the country over the years, and you just hear them over the PA, like, street stocks, line up over and over and over, and it slows the show down. At Beach Ridge, you weren't lined up, you didn't race. There was just
Right.
no argument about it. But that track,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ralph handed the business off to the kids to run. I think we should celebrate the fact that it was in business as long as it did in race.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to make peace with that. If you take all the other stuff out of the equation of why or how it got sold, and everyone has their own opinions, and of course, I think you and I have talked over the years about the scourge of our industry, which is social media. But if you have a problem with something at the racetrack, maybe just go to the guy who runs the track and have that discussion there. And I think when you look at tracks around the country, and everyone's so quick to bitch and complain, and then when it's gone. Now,
Social media has made it way easier for people to bitch and complain.
Yeah.
One of the toughest, one of the best and worst things, because social media is great for racing, it's also terrible for racing because it's giving people a soapbox. But the problem is that some of those voices are idiots.
Yeah, uneducated opinion, and it's your opinion, right?
Right.
And if you're sitting around in your shop during the week complaining about the tech guy or some lineup on a restart, that's one thing. It's 3 or 4 people talking about it. You blast it on Facebook, and there might be 5,000 people seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be handled different. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I remember, there were a couple incidents. I remember at Concord where
It's
I
easy to get
was lit
sucked
up.
in.
And, you see the Facebook memories, and you go back and look at it, and you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
And man, I just shouldn't have done that. And I realized the damage it did. And let's talk about things aren't always going to be perfect. right?
Right.
And you're not always going to get lined up in the right row or whatever. But man, when it's gone, and it's gone at Beach Ridge. It's not coming back. And yes, it's a disappointment. But I'd also say this. I can cry and complain all day long about Beach Ridge being closed, right? But when we went up there for the test, it was like a month or two before the actual tour race, there wasn't 500 people in the stands, okay? Yeah. Now let's talk sheer numbers. That doesn't pay to open that business up, right? It's just, and that's, people say, they should have promoted better. It's this, that. You go to every track around the country, right? That's where we're at, right? Well, how long are you going to run a business that loses money, right? Now, they can't operate that racetrack off my memories from 1988. Right?
I know. Money makes the world go round, and it's harder and harder. You have to put the asses in seats to make the money. The more fans you have at the racetrack, the more money you're going to make. Yeah. Obviously. Why? I mean, there's obvious reasons of why the crowds are dwindling at short tracks around the country. Why do you think it is?
We have so many other options and other things to do. I think it's one thing. I think we're in a short attention span thing. Dirt racing is just off the charts. And when you get 30-lap features, right? And we're still stuck in the 100 and 150 lappers on tour races. But, you go some tracks and it's 10 divisions. Sensory overload and there's 4 cars in each division. That doesn't work. Or, let's talk about late models. You go to a track and they got street stocks, limited late model, pro late model, all the same body. I don't know
the
what
cars look alike.
They all look the same to me. I don't know what the heck they are, And so we've lost a generation. Like I grew up changing the oil with my dad on his car. You don't do that anymore, right? And so I'm probably the last of the generation of car guys. And kids, the rite of passage for me as a kid was getting your driver's license at 15. And my parents give me a ride around. We got Uber or whatever else. And,
I know, right? For me, getting my license back then was like freedom.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then you get the folks, they get on Facebook and they're yapping about, I just build a race. I go in the junkyard and build a street stock. Really? Go to the junkyard right now and see if you can build street stock out of what's sitting in that lot. There's no metric chassis and Camaros and all this stuff. They're not there. There's mini, stuff, maybe mini stock stuff, but you got the Fast and Furious crowd, that's what they're into. But you can't go build a street stock anymore, right? You have to go buy a car that's an old late model, and so the tracks have had to change the rules to do that. But it's just we've lost that generation, and it's really up to us to get it back. And you do all these pit parties and stuff after the race, and you got to engage the kids back into it. And that's why, like with Millbridge and some of these other tracks, I see the kids coming back into it. But you have to engage them, and they have to be part of it. But for me, I couldn't wait to go see cars, and now it's just generational. It's different. So the promoters and track operators and the competitors, more important, right? We eat our young in this sport. We're horrible. The racers, we tear this apart,
Just to quickly interrupt you, and I've said this to other people too, racers are a peculiar lot in the sense that I've never seen a group of people love to hate the sport they love so much, because they will bitch and complain and whatever it is, and and at the bottom line is we're supposed to be having fun at doing this, and they love to hate the sport they love.
And certainly I've been part of it. I look back and saw how I reacted to things, but man, we it's up to us to fix this. And like I've seen the Smart Tour that we run on now, they do pit parties when they can, the pre-race deal, and the kids line up getting hero cards and engage with the kids. Don't act like I don't really want to be here, right? Farmer Ted, man, he's just that guy. He's got that personality. Some guys don't have that personality, but you got to make the effort, or it's just not going to happen anymore. We're in the entertainment business. Everyone thinks, we're racers, but if no one pays to come see us race, there are no races.
The promoters used to say, you're here to put on a show.
Yeah. We have to be part of the solution. And even at Concord, towards the end, when it was looking dismal, Bobby and I both went to to the people that were running the tag. Jennifer was there and some others, and we'll do whatever we can to help promote out here. You have, local business openings, parades, calendar, whatever you need. If we can show up and be part of the solution, we want to be part of that. Mm-hmm. And then we'd hear stories, yeah, you guys are great, but we asked so-and-so, might have been like the track champion for another division. And he's like, he wanted $100 to bring his car to the parade or something. You're like, man, I get it. Maybe the answer was I just don't have time to do it, but we have to be part of the solution. We can't just say it's promoters and track operators. We as racers have to be part of the solution and engage the younger generation.
You definitely have to get them young, because that's how you get them hooked, because everyone reverts back to their childhood memories and they look at that as the special times. So getting them at that early age is very crucial. However, we have hit a point in racing where we're seeing younger and younger kids getting into full-size cars. And I think the question that we're going to pose to guests this season is, what is the need or the rush to put children in full-size race cars nowadays?
Yeah, this is a big pet peeve of mine. I remember we ran it was a North-South shootout, which I think Pass was promoting, and it was at Caraway, and I'm not going to name the name. There was a kid that was like 12, missed a shift on the restart and just destroyed half the field. And I remember someone made the comment, well, give the kid a break. He's just, he's learning. We're learning how to shift in a tour race. That you learn that at your local track, right?
Right.
Or you start in a mini stock, and then you get a street stock, and you move up and you learn, right? And you should prove yourself at every level. And like you said, we're taking kids out of like Bandoleros and putting them in a super late model, and that's not fair to the other competitors. I mean, I was like, what? Are we serious here? And what's happened is, like you said, there's a rush to push these kids faster and up the ladder, and it's unrealistic expectation.
There's talented kids, don't get me wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
There really are. I mean, a kid that races at one of the tracks that I help manage, kid's name is Beckham Malone. He went and won He went and won the crate late model race. Now everyone was up in arms about an 11-year-old winning a crate late model race. However, I can see the other end of the coin, because if the other people saw what he raced weekly, which is way more dangerous, with the micro sprint, the late model is like, driving around in a bathtub.
Yeah.
I get there's a balance. There has to be a balance we need to have.
It's tough because all these series are competing to get competitors, right? So do you turn them away? But a lot of these touring series have turned into like development series or just stepping stones for the next big thing, and it is a generational. I'm not going to get on this crazy millennial rant. It's not that. It's just how things have turned into, and man, we had our car for sale. I remember when we sold our Pro Late model, and that thing was race ready, spotless. We ran it 2 or 3 years. It won, I don't know, some ridiculous amount of races. And I think Bobby had 2 or 3 dozen kids with their dads come look at that car. And I think we had like 18 grand on it or something, right? And these kids with their dad would come look at it. And then they'd leave and we never hear from them again. And then you see they went to Hamke and bought, a turnkey car for, $60,000, $70,000. And so Robert, as gruff as the guy was, he and I always got along, and begrudgingly we'd bust each other's balls a little bit. And I said, hey, by the way, you're welcome. And he's like, what's that supposed to mean? I said, we've showed this damn car. I mean, it's a beautiful car.
Right.
Big pedigree. We got these kids looking at it, never raced a full body car in their life, and they look at our car and then they leave and buy a turnkey car with you. It's insanity. Why wouldn't they learn in a beater? And he's like, I appreciate that. He said, but
which it wasn't a beater. I mean, you guys kicked ass with that car.
Yeah, no, it was. Right. I mean, it had a brand new body. I mean, it was slick, and it's still racing now. I've seen photos of it. The guy I don't even think he's tore a fender off it. He's still got half our graphics on it. Right. But I think we sold it for like $12,000, $13,000. We probably had 40, some insane amount of money in it. And Yeah, the mentality was if I have the money and I'm going to give my kid the best shot, I'm going to give him the best opportunity. Sure, wouldn't we all want that? But what really makes more sense? You're going to tear it up. You're going to knock the clip off it. So why not clip off a lesser expensive starter car or something? But
it's I feel your pain because I'm going through that right now, and I'm trying to sell a couple of my dirt cars off, and I've had people come look at them. Only to turn around and just go and buy something brand new.
Well, a lot of it is I think a lot of people don't work on their cars anymore, right? So back when we were probably growing up, there weren't as many as those services available. Like that was huge in legend cars. Is these guys that their job is they prep 4 or 5 cars and they do that service. It's big in late models now. There's a lot of without naming all the teams, there's a lot of teams that's their full-time business is fielding and renting and prepping cars for people.
Look at the North-South shootout we were just at this weekend. I mean, I would willing to guess that half of those cars that were in the late model pit were deals.
So why wouldn't you just buy a new car? Because if you knock the clip off it, you're just going to send them the check, right? It's not like you had to do it yourself. So that that's part of it. And not knocking any of those people that run those businesses because they took the opportunity and
they're a business.
Sure,
they have to keep the lights on. They've got to keep the bills. I understand that part of it. I totally understand the business end of it where you got to do what you can to keep the doors open.
Yeah.
But we had Todd Bodine in here the other day. It was great. He was talking about starting a truck team. And he said, if I start a team, the driver that I want driving for me is going to go work out in the morning. After he works out, he comes in afternoon, works with the team for a couple of hours on the trucks, figuring stuff out. You go and have lunch together, all that stuff, which is team building.
Yep.
It was 100% team building.
Well, so double-edged sword there. So here's an example where that works against you a little bit. If your driver works on the stuff and he realizes how much work is involved to fix it when it gets tore up, is he going to drive it with just complete abandonment to the next level, or is in the back of his mind, man, I don't want to tear this thing up? And I ran into that with Bobby because Bobby understands what our finances are and what we have what equipment we have. I have one best of everything. I don't have crash carts and backup parts. We go to Bristol, which I couldn't wait to go, and the modifieds are blindingly fast at Bristol.
Yeah.
And you got to run the top and you got to dig, right? But when they wreck at Bristol, they're grinders, right? And I always felt we missed a little bit there, and he would say the same thing because I think at the back of his mind was, man, I don't mind legging it out at Concord because I'm comfortable there, which was an insanely fast track. But this place, I'm worried about everyone else too, and the chances that we ball this thing up are big. So I don't know if I can drive it at 100%.
Right.
But if you don't own the car and you don't have
anything invested,
I think that's the thing. And when you see some of these kids, they just jump in a car and just are blinding fast because, I wrecked. That's the old. Well, it was the last lap, and I had to do what I had to do thing, right? Which is a whole nother thing.
I get that balance. There is that what you're talking about, that abandonment they go into, but there's also way over the line where these kids are just punting you out of the way now to get a spot, and we are seeing it more and more and more. And what is your take on it?
It's tough because I've been around so long. At the highest levels, the cars are so safe. Right? I think some of that is you wouldn't hook a guy at Atlanta back in the day, right? You wouldn't hook that guy because you don't want to hurt him. And now you barrel roll the thing down the front stretch and get out and, we'll get another one. But it's like the iRacer mentality, I call it. When you watch some of these short track races and then, they just flat out just run somebody over on the last lap and it's last lap. Do what I got to do.
We're seeing it at all the levels, though. Like even the kids racing now in the box stock divisions. I see first off, what drives me nuts is the side pods on the cars. I mean, you're supposed to be racing open wheel vehicles, so lose those side pods because that allows for too much door slamming and leaning on each other. In my opinion, teach these kids to stay off of each other, but still race close. But they'll just go in there and just completely just door slam you and punch you out of the way.
Well, like I said,
we can't be teaching them that at this young of an age.
it's the iRacer mentality. What I always said was, you just hit reset and start over. But it comes down to expectations of leadership, and who is it, your parents or whoever you're driving for. That expectation has to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You tear it up, you're gonna fix it, man, or you don't want to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Really, when you go from playing on your computer at home and then you're racing at the track, the difference is real. Like you could get hurt, right?
Right.
So that's big. I'm not gonna crap on technology because it's so important, and that's just part of what it is. But I did laps at Hickory, so I'm ready to go get a late model, on my computer. So I'm going to go get a late model and run around there. It's different,
right?
But
the iRacing or the computer racing, what I think does, because I've tried it before, what I think it does is that it gets you acclimated to your environment.
Sure.
I didn't go into it thinking I'm going to be balls to the wall and
Right.
I've got this track figured out. No, I went to the track thinking, okay, I did it on the computer. I kind of have an idea of what the place is going to look like from behind the
Right.
windshield.
Well, I think it's good for the sport. I think it's important. It just, the expectation is too high, and we allow it. Right? You plow through someone on the last lap, then you don't win.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get race directors and track series and promoters. Then they got to deal with the line of parents after the race. Why'd you penalize my kid? He won. And well, why didn't he wreck people on lap 2 then? Well, they do that too. But I mean,
Yeah.
what's the difference if it's lap 1 or lap 100, right? It's funny when I see all these things on the internet, all these old cars that people find, like they just restored Freddie Fryer's, one of his old late models, and you see all these cool old cars being restored. Do you see any old cars getting restored that have been built in the past 25 years? Because they're destroyed.
Right.
There is no.
They're wrecked.
There
They're
is
junk.
There's no value to them anymore. And how did these guys race these cars for 15 years, and they're sitting out behind somebody's shop, and they restore them? And you don't restore an old Port City car anymore. It's probably been folded up, and it's different. It's expectations. I think that falls on. It's a tough decision, but it falls on race directors and promoters to hold fast with some of those rules and the penalties and things. But
here's my take, though, on the bump and run or knocking somebody out of the way on the last lap. If second punts or dumps the leader on the last lap coming to the checkered flag, you set both of them down and give third place the win. That's it, period. The end of story. That both of them go to the rear because you're involved in the caution, and third place gets the win. We've seen guys punt someone out of the way, and then they give the guy the win.
Well, look.
And they all fall back on that cheap ass Rubbins racing excuse, and I can understand leaning on guys side by side and all that, and maybe tapping a little bit to let them know you're there. But when you go in the corner and just flat punt someone out of the way, or dump them, or bump and run, whatever you want to call it, that is just a chicken shit move.
Oh, well, I always say pass. That gouge move on the inside going in turn 3 and just drive her on in there. It's. I don't know. That's the old school in us. I don't have the answer on how to change that. I really don't.
Right.
Certainly, one of the biggest wrecks Bobby ever had at Bowman Gray was one of those where, he dumped the leader by accident, and then it's coming next.
Right.
To Bowman
They're
Gray.
waiting on you.
Well, they give you your spot back. So the guy that got dumped went to the back. Bobby's leading, and so. He ended up in the end of pit wall, the entrance to the pit area, and fans loved it.
Yeah.
But it was a substantial crash, and but that's the show there, which is a little bit different. But I agree with you. I don't have a good answer, but I think, like you said, that you've got to hold them accountable, right? Maybe that's the level, but it's tough because the pushback is just insane. That's why I like at Millbridge. They make some calls there, and that's what I've always liked about that is she's made some calls out there that aren't they're not happy about, and she sticks to it, and so I appreciate seeing what she does out there. But I think more series and tracks need to maybe do that more, but then they worry, are we going to run them off? Is that
The drivers need to be held accountable about driving dirty. They really do, in my opinion.
yeah.
Anyway, bouncing around now a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about Beach Ridge and racing in late model country and everything. How did you actually make the venture down here? Because we chatted briefly. You said you'd worked for some Busch Series teams for a little while too. What happened in those years?
So when I was still in Maine, I thought I was going to be a police officer. I was a police officer for City of South Portland, and in my hometown of Scarborough, I was a reserve officer.
You used to be a cop?
I was.
No
yeah.
kidding.
Yeah, and I worked for a local business in my hometown that was owned by a retired fire chief, friend of my father's, a friend of the family, and so I worked for him full time, selling police and fire equipment, and hose and bunker gear and boots, and we wired up police cars and did all that, and then we started selling fire trucks, and that's turned into be what I was going to end up probably doing after that. I was just something that I was good at, was selling fire trucks, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And when they built New Hampshire International Speedway, they scheduled, I think the Oxford 250 was the week before, and then they went to the inaugural race there at New Hampshire. And a guy in the business that sold fire truck chassis helped out Tom Peck, who was out of McConnellsburg, PA. It was the blue 96 car.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Frazier worked on that car, who runs Dale Jr.'s late model program.
Okay.
And Sammy Johns, who I think is the competition director at RCR. That's who their crew was. And Reds Cagle was the crew chief. And
just amazing, those
crazy.
names.
Yeah. And so my buddy Denny Chamberlain was his name. He sold chassis, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, I know you do some racing," because I had worked on a car at Beach Ridge, and hey, we're going to run the 250, and then if we get tore up, do you know any place we could work on that car before New Hampshire? And so in the town of Scarborough, Kelly Moore had his shop, Joe Bessie had his shop, and then of course I wanted him to use our shop, which was Phil Weeks, is whose car I was working on then. He had a cool little shop, and absolutely. So we go to the 250, and they had a little bit of body damage, and so come on down. So they worked on that car at our shop next to my parents' house next door, and man, this is the coolest thing ever, right? And then went to New Hampshire, and I carried tires for Sammy Johns, and that was back when you carried 2 tires.
Right.
You jump down off the wall at New Hampshire. Anyone who's ever crewed for a car at New Hampshire know the difference. Is the pit wall is you jump down. You don't jump over that wall. It's flush. Mm-hmm. And no helmets, no pit road speed limits. Man, it was the coolest thing ever. And so I carried tires for him. And I remember Tom after saying, "Hey, if you ever want to come to races, we'll get your credentials and come on down." So me and a buddy who went down to Daytona the next year, and they were filming Days of Thunder that year.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And Tom qualified way up front, too, if I remember. And it was just, this is the coolest thing ever. A kid from Maine. I mean, here we are down
in the Busch, too.
In the pits there, yeah.
The Busch race, the 250 miler, right?
Yeah, it was insane. And it just, this is cool, but never thinking there was an opportunity, to do anything. And funny story, I think it was that year, maybe the next year, I went down to Daytona, and back then they didn't have full-time pit crew guys. You had to find people local, and it was always wherever you raced, there was Fred and John and Jim would come and help you there, and
somebody knew someone from the local shore track.
Yeah. And like on Tom's car with Brian and Sammy would change tires, but someone else would jack and whatever. So we're at Daytona, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get to carry tires here at Daytona for Tom Peck. And I was, I got my black jeans on and my black sweatshirt. I'm all excited. I got my own headset, thinking I'm cool. And like an hour before the race, Denny Chamberlain, who was the one that kind of got me into all this, he used to be catch cam. And he goes, "Hey, we're going to be Grissom needs help. They don't have enough people, so you're probably going to fuel that car." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, you think he could hold the can up and all that?" I'm like, "I didn't even know how to burp the dry. I knew nothing. I never even held a fuel can in my life. And I was like, no, I can't do that. Oh, they need help. And I'm thinking, I don't want to pass up an opportunity. And Steve Grissom was a big name at the time. It was probably
I think he had won the championship by then.
Yeah,
right?
and it was probably the next year. It's like the Big Mama Meat Snacks car, maybe, or maybe it was.
Right.
Maybe it was. I forget who else was on there, but I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that at a speedway. Like, come on, and that's how it was back then. You just got the people you could. So it ended up Denny fueled the car, and I was catch can. Right, I never even done that before. So we do the stop, and they don't have, like nowadays you have that fuel can cart that holds 3 cans. Back then you used the tire cart, and you'd like bungee cord them onto this cart. It was just raggedy thing. So he gets all the cans and throws it on there. He says, all right, now you go down to the end of pit road and go to the fuel pumps and get them filled up and bring them back. And I'm like, sure, okay. Run down there, wait in line. I don't know anything about anything, and the guy finally waves me over, and you can't go past the rope and all this stuff. I'm just trying to figure it out, not get in trouble. And they fuel the thing up, fill up the cans. I take it back, and Denny's standing there, and out comes this notepad, and I knew right then I'm in trouble because he says, "All right, how much did they take?" And I'm just,
oh shit.
like, what do you mean? He goes, well, how much they take? No lie. I go, aren't they like 11 gallons a piece? It's 22 gallons. They're full. And he's just like, you didn't write down how much they took each can? Well, they have this rope up, and everyone knows what I had no idea that I was allowed to, I didn't know. And he just stares at me. So here we are at Daytona Speedway race.
Right.
I have no idea. They don't even have it.
How deep into the race are you at this point?
We're halfway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was bad. It was a bad deal, right? I'm like, what have I done? I had no idea. I was just like,
For Grissom. This was for Grissom,
yeah.
right? Okay.
I think.
How was he running in the race at the time?
Good.
Okay.
I think he probably got tore up. Thank God. Maybe I don't even remember what happened. That was my takeaway from that. I was like, they're full. I don't know how much. I thought it was a dumb question at first. Like, aren't they 11 gallon?
Yeah.
It's 22. But anyway, so I ended up selling fire trucks, and I ended up moving to Virginia. Ended up being the national sales manager for American LaFrance fire trucks, and they were in Bluefield, Virginia, of all places. And now I can drive to every one of these Busch races. So Tom was driving for Carol Levin at the time, I think, and Butch Enders was crew chief.
Okay.
And I would just show up and set up the pits. Back then, there were no pit boxes. You had to drag everything out there, and they had the old cages. You'd screw on the nitrogen bottles, and I just was happy doing anything I could do, helping out,
Cool.
And so here I am down there just thinking this is a cool little fun thing on the side. And, I'd carry tires once in a while, and then I'd start jacking a little bit. And then the same guy, Denny Chamberlain, says, so American LaFrance got sold to Freightliner. It's actually down here in North Carolina. And so I was going to be offered a position to move over there. And Denny knew about this. And he said, there's this company called Racing Electronics in New Jersey, and they're looking for somebody to go work for them. And I'm like, to do what? I mean, I didn't get it. Now, I had a background in radios because I was a police officer and around fire trucks, and I knew about radios and things. And I met with the owner of Racing Electronics at Martinsville Busch Race.
Bruce
Silver.
He was the original founder of the company, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that would have been like 1993, something like that. It was way back. And so I ended up going to work. I moved to New Jersey, and I worked for Racing Electronics. And then I was there 2-3 years, and I left. I moved down to North Carolina. I got offered a position from Butch Stevens with BSR Products.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Seifert owned it with Butch, and it was just an opportunity to get to Charlotte. I thought maybe there's something there. I could figure it out. And I worked for Butch for about a year, and Diamond Ridge Motorsports needed a parts guy, and I took that job and ended up being the operations manager at Diamond Ridge until they got sold. Gary Bechtel owned that. That was a Cartoon Network car.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That was an experience in itself, just to see what real World Cup racing.
Who was
all
driving the
about.
Cartoon Network car at the time?
When I first got there, they had just fired Steve Grissom, and it was Robert Presley.
Okay.
And then they had the Busch team, which was just killing it. That was Jeff Green and Elliott Sadler in his first year. That was probably the best Busch team in the series at the time. And then a bunch of famous crew chiefs there we went through. Yeah, and then they fired Robert and put Jeff Green in the Cup car, and the Cup car was like a 25 place car. It just wasn't going to work. And then at the time, I think Gary had enough of spending his own money, and it was ultimately sold to Joe Gibbs Racing, bought that.
Okay.
And at the time, the general manager at Racing Electronics was looking to leave and go do something else, and he called me up and said he didn't know that Diamond Ridge was about to get sold, and he said, hey, you want to take my job here? And I've been back ever since. That would have been 1999, I think. So almost 25 years I've been back. So
At
Racing Electronics, yeah. So,
So you had left there and then went back.
Yeah, I'm on my second tour of duty. So
okay.
Yeah, and so we Bruce ran the company and then sold it to FanVision. I don't know if you remember FanVision.
I've heard of it.
They had that little TV device.
Right, the FanView.
FanView, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that company was called FanVision. And they just couldn't figure out how to make it all work. And racing is very expensive device to run in this all the back story to get that thing to work. And they just kind of wanted out, and that we were sold to ISC, International Speedway Corp, which then was bought, through NASCAR and taken private. So I work technically for NASCAR now, but best thing for our company, I've been so blessed to have this long career in motorsports, and I genuinely love what I do. I love the impact that I can have in the sport that I love, and it's important to me that it stays relevant. And really, it's the grassroots part of our sport that is so important, because we have to have that feeder series, and how do we make that work? And I know there's some really good plans going forward, on the NASCAR side of things to have a significant positive impact on short track racing. But for me, it's like my thing that I want to give back, and like I do with Bobby, and I'm certainly getting roped into that with Brody, but I want to be part of the solution in this working out.
It's always better to leave the place better than you found it, But now you're vice president at Racing Electronics. You were that guy that was helping people, helping people as far as sponsorship goes. Now that RE is such a huge company, I'm sure the calls come in all the time about people looking for sponsors. How do you handle them when they come calling and looking for you?
It's tremendous, the amount, and I get it. And it's tough when you're in a company our size. That if you sponsor one, then you have to sponsor everybody, right? But I can remember at Concord, when Bobby was racing for me then, and we'd have people call up and just rag on Bobby and I want that Racing Electronics sponsorship, not knowing I'm the guy, right? It's just kind of funny. They didn't even know who I was. And that 14 car, a bunch of cheaters over there, and that guy's a jerk, and you got to sponsor our car. We'll take it under advisement and we'll see what we can do. But I do more counseling than anything. To just, the old school way, when you had a car at your local racetrack, you'd call up somebody and go to a local gas station, give me $100 and I'll put your sticker on my car or whatever. And that's changed because they've all got beat up over the years, where what did they get out of it, and so you have to show value. And it's funny, the story I use is Bobby, because Bobby came to me and said, hey, can you help me out? But then he was engaged, and he would call me and give me his results and send me photos.
He built a relationship with you.
Yeah, and I mean, I work with the most famous teams in North American motorsports across all different types of racing, whether it's NHRA,
right? Because RE supplies radios not just for NASCAR. You do IndyCar, you do drag racing, everything.
We're all over,
dirt track racing.
And they were for a long time. We go to the PRI show, and you're like, you'd call some of these big name teams, and you'd say, hey, I just need some photos for a slideshow. And it's like pulling teeth. Yet, I got Bobby Meismer sending me, how many photos you want? You want me to come and sign autographs, right? So I use that as an example of what can you give back? Like the sponsors on My Modified are the same that I've had since day one. Mm-hmm. They're true partnerships. Ed Fennell with Z-Max, I've known him for 20-something years. And he makes it clear to me and everybody else, we've got a big name. Why do I have to give you anything? What's the value that you're going to give me back, right? And so with Z-Max, it's, do I send him customers? And I have. There are vendors in the industry that now retail his product because I set up that call, right?
Right.
So it's important that you give value. So if you're going to get $100 or $200 from some local hair salon, what are you giving them anything back for that investment? Are they getting the $200 back that they invested in you, right? And so, like with my Modified deal, we've always over-delivered on our hero cards. I put every darn sponsor's logo on that thing I can, and I hand them out. And there are a lot of instances where I've seen people that, I don't know if we should put them on the card. They didn't really give us. Did they really earn the quarter panel spot? And
right.
Just put.
Well, I have to say thank you then for putting my Derek Perniciglio show sticker on your card.
Yeah.
So thank you. I hope I brought some value to it.
Well, we didn't win because you like every car since it won. It was in Victory Lane after, but we're particular because I like my cars to look right, but I want to represent our sponsors right. But I understand that you got to give value back, and when I tell, do you know Chuck Cabrera? His kid's racing go-karts, and he's one of the best ever. And
I remember that name when I was a kid racing go-karts.
Yeah, he was running. Now his kid's racing, and it's Caleb, right? I was get it wrong. And that kid's winning, right? And he's, but I get updates, and I get pictures, and he swung by the shop. And it's funny at PRI, I remember I'll see this girl this year, guaranteed. Like 6 years ago, first of all, we get a lot of these kids that show up with their parents, right? And the parents hand me this 18-page marketing deck, professionally done deck, and hey, my kid's running a quarter midget, and
they want you to read 18 pages.
And the requests are unrealistic, right? And so this girl comes with her parents, and they stood off to the side. She came to me and talked to me and said, hey, I'm racing this. I don't even remember what it was. I don't even remember what she races. And it's my first year, and I raced go-karts, whatever, and she did all the talking. And I was so impressed because she did it. And she was probably 8 or 9, maybe 10. I was so impressed that she did it, not them. And so we did a little deal for her and took care of her on some product. And every single year since, she shows up to the PRI show, and she comes over, and she never asks for another thing. And she brought us a cookie basket one year, and then maybe some other swag the next year. And I keep taking care of her because she understood the value of the relationship. C.E. Falk, when he was racing, I remember he had like a Bandolero. He was, I don't know, 10. His dad didn't bring him to me. He stood outside, and he walked in the truck, and he asked me, hey, I need some help. What can you do for me? And a lot of it is discounts on product and things like that, but people don't understand that there are other ways to achieve what you're trying to do, but you have to form that partnership. That's what's important.
It definitely is true. I know what you're talking about. I mean, we are always trying to find support for this show and just get the word out there. I mean, just building an audience for us has been, a task in and of itself. I mean, we fight for every viewer and subscriber that we get. But it's been.
In our case at Race Electronics, is we've put so much energy back into grassroots racing and supporting the series. But I would say 90% of the people you see that have our decal on their car have it on there because they like dealing with us or dealing with my staff. For years, some of the guys would, they'd come back from a race. Man, I was at Berlin, and there was a guy asking about you. I haven't been to Berlin. It was probably an ASA race in the 90s, right? And I always say, well, that's cool that the guy remembered me, but what's more important is that he remembers you next time. So create that relationship with that customer so that next time he's going to say, hey, I remember dealing with Andy or John or whoever else you guys got. It's the same thing. It's the relationship, that's what's important in the sport.
Yeah, believe me, I understand it because you guys have always taken care of me on pit road, not just with driving. You made sure that, my scanners were all, good stuff. And I remember you saw me on TV doing a report one time with some old headset, and you were like, what are you wearing that dinosaur for? Come here and come in and we'll get you set up with a headset and everything. And I have to say thank you because, I've always been RE equipped on pit road, and it's always worked well for me. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate it. It goes both ways. And that's what I try to impart on some of the younger folks when they're looking for sponsors and how to move on. Ryan Priest, I met him. He was trying to run I think he ran the snowball derby with Dillner, and that's where I met him. And it's just, we've done what we can to help that guy out. I mean, we don't write checks. Right. That's sometimes more important. Right? Yeah. It's the relationship, and he knows if he's big time now, but I mean, some of these guys would know that if they called me up, it could be, hey, do you know somebody over at this brake company? Or, hey, do you know who I can talk to over here for that? And those of us in the industry, that's where the help is. It isn't always the check and the dollar. It's
bringing people together sometimes, hooking up this person with that person. I get that a lot, who I can, who do I know where I can get started running this type of car or that type of car.
I mean, Bobby just got asked the other day by somebody wanting free stuff from one of our sponsors. It was odd exchange, That's what we do as racers, man. We just,
I know,
it was that blatant, like, hey, who do I call over there so they can give me some stuff? Right. And you're like,
they are a peculiar lot, but we definitely want to thank you for coming in and for sitting down and talking with us. Did you have fun? Would you come back and do it again? We got to bring Bobby on actually, and
you don't have enough. Do you have enough tape?
With Bobby. He's always a great guy. We've always had a mutual respect for each other because we're buds from the Concord days. But thank you very much for coming in. We definitely appreciate it. Thank you for the swag too, the backpack and the spray cleaners and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. We got the Matchbox car here, which
How cool is that?
It is. We're gonna keep that around for sure. But definitely thank you for coming in, and we're definitely gonna have you back.
All right.
Kevin Hughes from Racing Electronics joins us, also a car owner on the Smart Modified Tour with Bobby Meesmer Jr. driving. Want to thank you all for joining us. And remember, follow us on our YouTube channel. Hit that like and subscribe button. The more subscribers you get, the better it is for us. Also follow us on Facebook at The Derek Perniciglio Show. Keep up with us on Twitter, well, they now call it X, and on Instagram at Real DP Show. So for Kevin Hughes, I'm Derek Perniciglio saying we'll see you the next time. Bye.